And let's just get it off. I mean, obviously, we're going to be talking about the water reclamation facility treatment plant a lot today. And I was wondering if the city, either Fred or Bill, could give us an update on what's going on right now.
I can give you an update. As of today, we've stacked 14 days in compliance with the NPDES permit. So as far as the discharge to the creek, we are in compliance. We haven't reached 30-day average yet, but I have to put 30 days in before I can get that. So otherwise, we're below our daily max for E. coli, and we meet all other discharge parameters.
Fred, could you clarify, are you 14 days in compliance with both of the permits or just the permit for the river?
I'm not in compliance with an average because I don't have 30 days I can average to meet that yet. But based on the numbers I'm seeing in the last 14 days, I believe we're on track to meet that.
For both permits?
No, not for both permits. No, for the discharge to the Santa Fe River. That's our
Gotcha.
NPDES permit. We are still not distributing water. We have to show the state 30 days of compliance with our DP 289 permit before we'll be allowed to start distributing that water.
Gotcha. So 14 days under the river permit of it being in compliance. Thanks for clarifying.
And that's the only place we're discharging right now. So that's the only thing at this point we have to comply with.
Great, thanks.
Hi, this is Michelle. I just curious, any idea what the fix was? Or how you're able to, what do we know why it's so much better now, I guess is the question.
It's better now because the biology in the plant is stabilizing. The break in the sewer line caused a destabilization of the biology in our plant. See, our plant's it's not a filter. It's not a machine. It's a biological living system. And sometimes it gets upset, gets sick, more or less. And that's what happened to us. We have to maintain a very close balance between the food that comes in, which is the wastewater, and the biological entities we put in our plant and grow in our plant to treat that wastewater. So when the balance comes, it gets unbalanced, okay? And I have, say, not enough food to feed everybody, they get upset. So what happens with our sludge line break, that's how we remove biology from our tanks. If we can't do that, it builds up too much, which means the bugs start to starve because the amount of food that comes into the tank is more or less constant. The wastewater comes in every day, it never turns off. If I get too many bugs, they get stressed, the population changes, and we get reactions in the tank that cause what we term pin flock. And the pin flock was affecting the transmissivity of the UV rays in our UV disinfection system. So over time, it's getting better, and it'll continue to get better over time, now that we can stabilize the biology. That makes sense? So it's not as simple as turning the switch, putting in a new piece of equipment. Even though it could be a piece of equipment that fails and causes the problem, you're still living with a living system here. So it has to stabilize. It has to get back to that sweet spot that it likes.
Christine, you had something to add to this. You want to do that now, or do you want to do that in a while?
It doesn't seem appropriate since it's not related to this topic
Okay.
at all.
All right, let's get through this, and then we'll talk about stormwater management. Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Darren, you got a question?
I do. Good morning again. So I guess recently we've got a decision from the Supreme Court, right, regarding enforcement and EPA's jurisdiction or controlling power as controlling authority in the redefinition of waters of the United States, right? And my understanding of that, and please someone help me solidify the understanding, is that the Supreme Court has backed off to the definition of waters of the United States being navigable waters, and then associated estuaries, tributaries that are actually, you know, physically in contact. So it leaves us in, I think, in our regulatory framework locally at somewhat of a loss. I think my question is, does the city intend to continue to meet the NIPD's standard of stringency, regardless of whether EPA has enforcement capability or some type of redress, you know, fines or any of that? That framework may be just disappearing. And where we relied on that in New Mexico, my question is, what's the city standard? Are you going to keep the federal standard? This is again where I ask, is anyone considering ISO 14001 as a framework to you know, keep on doing continual improvement cycles with this system, and then eventually tie the supply and the reclamation elements of the system together, and have that you know, be something that we can look at in the future proactively, and in terms of not just doing damage control operations constantly, especially when I think Fred, thanks for putting that in perspective. The nature of a treatment system being much like an organism, in fact, containing, right, organisms doing their work that need to be stabilized and have their micro community healthy for them to do their job, right? They are biomachinery, right? So that's an important element to consider there. If we're looking at it in terms of now, this is a great format. We're doing the Deming cycle. There was the corrective action. Okay, fix the sewer leak, restore the biology. Now we have to look at preventive action in the future, right? And start doing cost benefit analysis on what we invest into this particular plant or a replacement facility, and start talking about how that's designed from lessons learned over the life of this facility, right? So that incidents, you know, that's great. 14 days in compliance beats still too high E. coli. But now we're left with the question of establishing that standard. Do we get that out of the city through their own robust environmental management system? Or do we get that from some other federal authority or state authority, which are actually, again, their policies are based in that same international standard? So that's what I'm wondering. What's the city's plan? What are we expecting to live up to, especially now considering that we've got, you know, downstream users beyond just contract users of effluent for watering, you know, the lawns on the golf course, etc.
Great question.
I don't believe the Supreme Court case that you're referring to will impact any of the permits that are held by our facility. This is the Santa Fe River is waters of the U.S. and the reading of that opinion won't change that. As far as whether the state will follow the federal or whether they'll expand their definition of waters, that's a policy issue for the state. And I don't know that the city has much to say with that. I think the city's made a commitment as far as discharges to the Santa Fe River. So I'm not sure exactly what you're asking.
That is what I'm asking, is what's going to be, maybe this is a bill question. What is going to be the city's policy in terms of a standard for the reclaimed water being released into the Santa Fe River to, for the general use of the public at large and for also the downstream users, irrigators, and domestic consumers. It really, I guess, let me put it to you just as I'll flip it around, Fred. If there was not some agency with a standard, an enforceable standard to issue a permit, would you care what was coming out of the plant?
So Darren, I'll jump in. I mean, it's an excellent multi-part question. I think from the water resource side, we're really pivoting through water resources and conservation to adopt the one water principle. So I'm glad to even see stormwater on today's agenda.
Mm-hmm.
I see no scenario where the city would be pivoting to relaxing any standards of treatment and water coming out of the Paseo Real. In fact, we are really ambitiously still working towards a day where direct potable is a reality and a possibility for Santa Fe. And in order to achieve that, obviously, we got to keep improving the water quality that comes out of our plant. So again, we've had some hiccups. We're not hiding behind that fact. Certainly, I guess the other piece that you have repeatedly asked is the ISO 1401. And where I guess I would respond to that is, I think there's a lot of merit and value to standards and accountability. And maybe I would propose for your consideration that be one of the topics in the Lower Santa Fe River planning process.
It will be done.
And I can just add that I know that the Surface Water Quality Bureau at the Environment Department is working on a permitting program for waters of the state. And it's going to be a longish process, a few years for sure at a minimum. But what it will do is it will also queue up a petition. Once they've established a waters of the state permitting program, it will queue up a primacy package and submission to EPA within some number of years after that in order to take authority for the NPDES program at a state level. So this is an active process right now. The state is committed to it. The legislature's given them money. They're advertising now for folks to work under the program manager who they've already hired, who is someone I know very well and is extremely competent to do this. And so I think that the state's not going to just allow this to happen again, because a few years ago during the Trump administration, we were in a similar situation where the WOTUS definition was changed, and 90% of streams, surface water in New Mexico was no longer protected. So, they're working on that. It's going to take some time, but any municipality that wanted to, quote unquote, relax their discharge, the concentrations in their discharge, would be foolish to do so by getting rid of their permit, saying it's not a water of the US anymore, because there is a RCRA exemption that exists for wastewater treatment plants that would no longer be in effect. And so if your sludge or anything that came out of your wastewater treatment plant had any levels of RCRA metals, which is the Resource Conservation Recovery Act, the sort of hazardous waste regulations, we have primacy over RCRA in New Mexico. And so that would be a very foolish thing for any municipality to decide to do. And I don't think that any of them in New Mexico would, particularly Santa Fe, would choose to invoke the wrath of the RCRA program, the hazardous waste program at their wastewater treatment plant. I saw a post by the cabinet secretary last week regarding that. And so I know that he's extremely serious about that, that exemption and what it would mean if a municipality decided that they no longer needed an NPDES permit. So there are a lot of things kind of moving at the Environment Department regarding these issues. And Darren, I want to assure you, as someone who worked there for 10 years and who actually signed the permit that's in effect at the wastewater treatment plant currently, that the NMED is not going to allow that to happen, you know, in anywhere. But Santa Fe in particular, it's where the state legislature is, it's where the state capitol is. It's the kind of thing that would be, the optics would just be terrible. So I agree with Bill. Nothing like that would happen, particularly here, but there already are things happening at the Environment Department that will bolster the state's program that actually doesn't exist yet, but they're working on. So I just wanted to throw that little update out there for you all.
Hey, Darren, it bears maybe repeating too, you know, as the city either has or will within days be locking in on a complete makeover of the master plan for Paseo Real. We're in the process of replacing the headworks. The aeration basins have been redone, and Fred is leading the charge on replacing both the UV lights and also soon thereafter the entire filtration system. So the city is really committed to making improvements and upgrades and to meet our obligations under the permit. And now it's up to us to prove it to you through our water quality that we're going to meet that initiative. And so we appreciate you keeping our feet to the fire.
Does that include emerging contaminants? I mean, that's one of those things that you know, that's on the horizon without question, that's going to be a requirement. And see, as one that's a little skeptical of continuing to refurbish the existing plant, I would love to see some thought put toward a new plant, and something that would really meet the needs of all of us in terms of moving forward. And if you want that potable water, that would be a way to really do it. And I know that's a long-term process and is expensive, but it's something I think that we really have to start looking at. I mean, you and I have been at this table too many times talking about the same situation.
Mhm.
And it's a little frustrating. And obviously some of the article that that we had our newspaper star, Mr. Munzberg in, really lays it out. I mean, it's like, and there are a number of things that I started writing down this morning in terms of things that I think we want to be able to, at the meeting on Tuesday, when the city's gonna, do you know who's gonna be representing the city at that meeting?
I think it's going to be an assemblage of people, Carl, but I don't think it's been determined yet that I'm aware.
Okay. But anyway, I would like to have something in hand to hand off to show you this is what we would like to see moving forward. And it's including water quality testing in different parts of the river, a notification system that we will put together, I think, by Tuesday, so that you'll know who to call and when to, and who to call initially, and then we'll have maybe a secondary, notice of some sort. We would like to have signs on the river. I know that's always been one of those things that everybody kind of shies away from, but if there are people actually in that water when they shouldn't be, there should be some way of notifying people quickly. And it's not just an email or a text. It's got to be something that people walking up and go, oh, okay, not today, kind of stuff. So those are some of the things I think we're going to propose, and I'm hopeful that not only the collaborative, but also the Pipeline Coalition would be supportive of that. And I'll be bringing something to them the next day or so that they can look at that and see if it's something they can support as well. It's all about just moving forward in a positive way. And I think we've been more than patient, a little too patient from my perspective. I think I wish we'd tried to tackle this sooner, but it's just one of those things that just can't continue. And it's one of those things that it absolutely is a trust issue now too, because people don't trust that plant. And it's happened too many times, and it's always some kind of failure, something goes wrong, and the optics of all of the people in the city being notified and being told not to use that water, not to be around it, and no notice whatsoever to going to downstream users is just it's not right. And so those are some of the things I want to put forward and things that we need to talk through and really work on, because this has to be a collaborative effort to get us all together and make these kind of things happen. But they have to. I mean, there's too much, there's too much has gone on in the past that we need to kind of fix now.
And Carl, if I could just add on to that, also the importance of having accessible information for when the water is safe as well, I think is also important. That that's also an important part of developing trust, is so that when people are hearing, is it safe, is it not safe, there's a very accessible site that, you know, the Watershed Association can share, that is redundant, that lots of people know where it is, that has updated information, so that whether it's safe, whether it's not safe, people know to go there and find the information that they can trust. I think that that's another important thing that hopefully should be relatively easy, because hopefully some data is being collected. So to make that more shareable to more folks in an easy way, I think will be helpful.
And that's got to include water quality testing after the wetlands on a regular scheduled basis, so that we know. I mean, that's the elephant in the room, is the wetlands, because we don't know what happens with water as it goes through there. We've been told by staff of the city that it gets just as dirty as it was as it went into the treatment plant, that it comes out that dirty. So we don't know. But that's one of those things I think we have to be able to test on a regular basis and ensure that that's not causing a secondary problem. And we will put this into some sort of format. Bobby?
So I have a question. So for Fred and also for Bill, what are the plans? What plans does the city have to create a wetland area, for remediation of the sewage that's coming? Well, not the sewage, but the effluent that's coming out of the treatment plant. Do you have plans for this?
Fred, I'll take it. We've heard a lot of there's been a lot of conversation through this group about potentially adding some supplementary wetlands for biotreatment. It's not in our current design. It's not in our plans, Bobby, at this point. Again, if out of this lower Santa Fe River planning process, if the merits of such an effort are worthwhile, I'm sure the city would be open to exploring it, or at least studying it. So I guess that would be my response.
Okay, that I take that as a platitude and not you all actually doing something, because as you said, we've talked about it numerous times here. It's very inexpensive. Many municipalities have used this system to remediate issues with a treatment plant. So, to say that you're going to study it is just simply putting us on the back burner again. So what can you do to push this forward in a more proactive way?
I don't want to speak, Fred, for the wastewater plant. It's not my group, but Bobby, I've seen Erin English give 1 hour long talk. I've tried to meet with her to better understand the applicability of that technology here in the Southwest. It's not as pervasive as some think it is, and the effectiveness is uncertain. So again, we would need to study it on top of the fact that we've got $35 million worth of work already coming towards the plant with what I previously mentioned, and it's all got to be integrated and phased accordingly in my mind. But again, I don't work in wastewater, so I'm only sharing my views.
Okay, thanks, Bill.
Yeah, our treatment goals would be to treat the wastewater to our discharge limits in our permit without a need for further remediation by any wetland. It's my understanding there's a wetland out there now just downstream from our discharge. That was a man-made system at some point in the past, and that I think Carl was just kind of insinuating that that could be degrading our effluent as it passes through there.
Brett, let me clarify that though, because let's go back in time. 23 years ago is when those wetlands were finalized, or the planting was completed. And at that time, the city, it was the Santa Fe River Commission, knew that they needed to put together a management plan for that area. And that's where it has fallen down, because I have a copy of it and I will share it on Tuesday, of that management plan that the Santa Fe Commission got together, and it never saw the light of day. There's never been any management, any wetlands that it's going to be a secondary treatment process has to be maintained. It has to be managed. It has to be cleaned periodically. There are all kinds of things that need to get done. And again, I'm not sold on that. I mean, it certainly is one of those secondary systems I would love to see, because if you look at what the biggest complaint that the Pueblos have is the quality of water, even when it's treated up to standards, isn't the kind of water they like to water their crops with. So that wetlands, which extend for over a mile, has never been maintained, never managed. We're concerned about the contamination of both soil and water. We're concerned about the ecological impacts of what's happened, and we think there's some need for some sort of ecological assessment, and that maybe that comes out of the planning process. But there are those kinds of things that really, we need to get serious about this. And I know, Fred, you're new to this and you're getting bombarded pretty quickly. And I on some level, I really regret that. But at the same time, I'm really glad you're here. And so it's just a matter of kind of talking through these things and figuring things out, looking at a little bit of history. I mean, one of the things I think I would like maybe to do with you, Fred, is take you down to some of the places we're talking about. And show you something like the Rael Ranch, maybe Tres Rios, and give you a sense of what is being impacted by what happens up above them at the wastewater treatment plant. There's a whole history and traditions that go back, and Darren can speak to them as well as anybody. And they go back to the Pueblo Indians, they go back to the Spanish time, and it's just one of those things that we continue to feel like we're stepchildren. And that we get passed along, and I have been in more than one meeting when a mayor will stand up and say, well, I'm not the mayor of La Cienega, so like, screw you guys, I don't have to do anything because you don't vote for me, kind of stuff. And I've got to say this, and I'm going to say this on the record, actually. I've had any number of comments made by the mayor about people from the county, both from county commissioners to county staff, that are really disrespectful. And I know that they're true. And that's the kind of attitude you might talk to the mayor, that he needs to start looking in the mirror a little bit, because when those things come out, it just fuels the fire on this side. And I've got two people wanting to talk, William first and then Darren.
And, I just wanted to build on what Carl said. And so our last meeting, we were talking about how maybe toxic things get caught in that wetlands, and then a storm event or something takes them out of there and puts them downstream. So I mean, because that wetlands is not working properly, it's more of a toxic storage area than anything else.
So the existing
Darren.
wetlands was not an engineered wetland. It was planted with cottonwoods and willows, and then left to, and then beavers moved in, and all of that happened, as you know. So what I'm talking about is using floating wetlands right below the wastewater treatment plant where the water comes out, and that those would be created specifically to pull some of those things out of the water before it hits all the willows and the cottonwoods and stuff like that. So yeah,
let me, if I could, I just want to put a little more historical context to this, particularly for Fred. No, the idea being that, remember, and to clarify this, hopefully it yields some clarification on the wetlands, right? A very loaded term, especially because when you consider, I guess, yeah, a quarter century ago, when downstream users were being sold the idea of establishing an artificial wetland there, that there was mentioned as a benefit, a potential value to it, justification for it would have been bioremediation. It was unquantified, it was speculative, but it was a selling point to get downstream users to support the idea of the city funding a nonprofit to go and have unforeseen environmental impact on the riparian system there. That's going along concurrently with the continuing campaign by the city of Santa Fe to supplant pristine water that's due to flow through that course of the stream system down to downstream users, some of whom have those rights adjudicated. That over time has happened to where we've seen little or no pristine water. At the same time, the city expands, the users in the county expand, the aquifer in La Cienega that used to recharge the river before it got to La Ojala gets depleted. And now you have a majority of effluent in the stream as opposed to effluent in the stream, right? So, and this is where this becomes, I think, a very emotional and very heated discussion, because then you're talking about the importance of that water. And there is just the, like, talk about the optics of it, the optics of being supplanted, treated effluent for pristine water, to which there is a right, then carries all of this other historical baggage with it about the various swindles and nefarious activities of the Santa Fe ring, et cetera, right? So that's when we have to say, look, we have an opportunity here by viewing this whole system as a whole system, holistically, right? Where, yes, you better believe we're excited down here about the possibility of potable reuse, so that maybe some real water actually makes it down through the river. And then when we start doing that, we can look at aquifer recharge and all these other, benefits that we look at in the future. But there is a difference between what the collaborative has looked at and noted repeatedly, as Carl says, as an idea towards working towards bioremediation through a wetland that's doing the job, not a non-managed wetland that is right now, like you say, acting like a concentrator, as opposed to having ever been managed or maintained to support that. And that habitat has mutated and gone out of control a couple of different times and had negative impacts on the downstream people. So that's the thing to do now. Is I think this work is important, painful as it is at times, but that's part of the discussion too, is okay. So, and I think this is what lights off the discussions about the pipeline coalition or return flow credit pipeline and that whole concept too. We can get back toward managing and reclaiming and reusing, directly compensating for the growth that's happened and supporting that system, making that somewhat more towards sustainability. Then we automatically start mitigating the impacts on the lower river. And maybe that system has a chance of improving some health, and you gotta wait for the weather and the will of God, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, so there's an opportunity before us here, but I don't think it's unfair at all. I think, Fred, you got to give it to our partners here. It is a snake pit to walk into politically and historically. So it's we try to give you as much forewarning and good lookout as we can,
Thank you, Darren and Bobby. I'm actually an advocate for the biotreatment, me personally, and I do think there's a place for it. And I really feel like we're really excited. Look at, my group here today, we got 5 of us. We want to be contributors to improvements on the lower Santa Fe River. It's not lip service. We're really hopeful that we could basically align what the objectives are and where the priorities are going to be, because some of these issues have been happening, as Darren has mentioned, for decades, if not longer. We cannot fix these overnight. I will say this, Darren, the city has committed through our agreement with the WildEarth Guardians to do some maintenance in the wetlands. I will share with you that agreement. It's not going to get us all the way there, but it's a step in the right direction, and it's a financial commitment and it's a contract. It's going to happen. You know, and while we're on the topic, you know, how actively are we going to collaborate on the water quality question in terms, you know, traditional ag does spread manure. We've had just an explosion of septic systems down there. We can't just only point the finger at the city, Carl. It's really, we got.
No, I agree. I absolutely agree.
Okay.
That need to be addressed. And that's why one of the reasons we've got to do not just a couple of areas of water quality testing, but it's got downstream even further. I would like to see at Tres Rios, another water quality testing there to see what no one needs because of their on that water for drinking water. Yeah, so I'm not
Is it my connection or Carl's?
there's this collaborative effort of us working together. And that's got to be at a political level, which makes it a little more difficult. And we can share and we can communicate. And that's really good, but we've got to have that political will and administrative support for the things that we're going to go forward. I mean, a perfect example is that management plan that was done 20 years ago. So it was a pretty good document, you know, but it never goes anywhere, and we cannot afford to do all this work, get things together, and all of a sudden there's a new administration, there's something to change, and all of a sudden we're going in another direction. We've got to do this almost outside of government.
That's maybe that. Sorry to interrupt you, Carl, but that's where I think it's important, Bill, to remember that the city keeps coming up in the conversation, but man, that's not always blame. You know, I mean, bringing the city up and keeping the city, our desire to keep the city engaged is not just to have a donkey to pin the tail on. It's a matter of realizing that the city has access, the city has resource, the city has strength, the city has all this power that can be used for our benefit or our detriment, depending how it goes, right? And so, no, it's not automatically make me comfortable to see the city again go off with one particular interest group without looking at the broader impact. And that's why I bring it up, you know? It's like, look, that's the mess we got into, the city behaving just that way 25 years ago. And that should have been, if we learn nothing else through this collaborative, it's let's all get to the table, or let's all go back to the community center and work this out before we start pissing everybody else off by degrading the environment and having impacts to their farms and ranches and communities and all this, right? So this is the important time to do it. So please hang in the conversation. It's not just about blaming the city. It's nearly to begging you to keep participating, but do it in a proactive and considerate manner, as opposed to thinking that the city knows best and we'll be satisfied with it because, you know, WildEarth Guardian says it's okay. I mean, you know, I don't know. So I'm just being honest about my reaction to that.
Yeah, no, I respect.
It's not blame. It's a matter of holding on for dear life to keep you guys engaged now.
Yeah, you know, and
Yeah,
I feel like you got Carl. You guys have all hit on a key point. When we kick off the planning, we have to capture the need to have a plan that it will be binding, and whatever that means in terms of financial commitment, oversight committees to ensure that we follow through this time. That would be my number one objective.
Wow. Good stuff. And again, this is where I really appreciate this group, because we get down to this level of talking to one another and knowing in our heads and in our hearts what we need to do. And the most important thing is just continuing to talk and resolving things and figuring things out and working through what are going to be some pretty difficult challenges as we move forward. And it's going to mean money. There's no question about this. None of these things are going to come cheaply. And one of the first things I want to get done, and I know this to me is an absolute priority, is to get the wells along the river tested. And we can get you a list of people within a half mile of the river who have wells. We can look at, but to me, there is no more important thing than finding out if we've got a problem with people's wells. I mean, Camila's gotten calls from her constituents crying about whether or not they can drink their tap water. Someone who has lived in the community for 40 years is worried about their tap water. And you just sit there and you go, yeah, you can't do this anymore. And there's just too many kind of missing parts of this, and more information, something Mori talked about, more information that people, more transparent we can be to get people to understand what's going on, the better, and it's not a quick fix. It's going to take a concerted and long-term effort. It's going to go through some administrations probably. And that's where I think we've got to build something that can withstand a change of administration, because we've been through that before. And for us out in the county, the first time we've really had an absolute advocate ally in Camila Bustamante. We've never had that before. We've had county commissioners who were really committed and felt good, felt strong about stuff. She is passionate. And she's experienced it, and she is part of trying to fix this thing. And so we're really excited to have her as part of the process.
Real quickly, people might say, well, Agua Fria Village, it's not a downstream issue or whatever, but what we've always done is since I think 2008 is we've always had the principle of all traditional communities hang together.
Yep. You have to. No, I agree.
The other thing that is, why Agua Fria's presence is always key is that it is exemplary of the bigger water picture that I'm talking about. And again, it's not a matter of assigning blame, but the facts are the facts. The city expands and consumes, and if not done properly, to the detriment of other intact, distinct communities, right? So that's there should be a harmony there. There should be a symbiosis there. I keep trying to get the idea back that after all, the Villa Real de Santa Fe de San Francisco de Asís is a traditional community too, right? And an Acequia community too. And so if the more that mentality can become again part of the civic culture, that can be sustained as part of the civic culture, as part of being the city different, then that's what really kind of brings us back to that whole water picture, where it's not just what comes out of the plant and it's all Fred's fault. Right? It's the bigger picture of how can water be managed and ameliorated and recaptured and put back toward we have a living river again, right? So
this is a perfect lead-in for Christine, right?
See what I did there?
It's like a setup. Boom. Out of the
Wow.
park.
Well, I'll gladly take the baton. Well, great discussion. I'm happy to be here again. This is the team that I work with at the city. Sometimes you see me here by myself or us individually, but I am really proud to be part of this section. And we're attacking or looking at lots of different issues. And one of the division's goals is to continue to try to work with the county and collaboratively on water conservation. And we've made a lot of progress. And I think that, the sponsorship of the Next Generation Water Summit is just something I wanted to talk a little bit about. We have a really, really great lineup. And as part of the sponsorship, all city and county residents can attend the summit virtually. And the lineup is great. So if I could just have a few minutes, I just wanted to talk about a few things that I thought if you could prioritize some of the sessions I'm talking about, then after the summit, maybe I can have some time on the agenda to talk to this group about what we learned and where we can network with, you know, the professionals who are coming to the summit so that we can all get on the same page quickly about opportunities that are quickly emerging and, you know, just provide us all that opportunity. So if you haven't registered, it's nextgenerationwatersummit.com. You just have to put in your zip code and you should get in. If there's any issues, just contact me directly and I'll get you on. And we have the mayor's reception on Thursday night. The public is invited to come to that. And we're going to be giving some, you know, awards for people who have done a really great job in the city on the commercial sector, some of our restaurants and hotels who have done a great job. And then we have 3 community tours on Saturday, and you're all welcome to come to those. The first one starts off at the Water Conservation Office, where we have a native garden, we've got 2 pollinator gardens, we have the Xerces pollinator kit planted, and we also have a native cactus rescue project application. And so you can come, we're raffling off rain barrels and answering questions. And then we have a tour following that at the Santa Fe Community College and looking at their greenhouse. And we have a small pilot there where we're trying to pilot sub-metering of how much water it takes to run that operation and collecting data there. So they're a partner of ours and excited to look at those applications. And then we're ending up at Reese Baker's house and touring his rain gardens, and then just a garden party, really, to just like celebrate the end of the of the really hectic week for all of us. And so you are all invited. All that information is on our website, savewatersantafe.com. And I just really quickly wanted to highlight a couple of the sessions that I thought would be really great for you know, all of us to talk about afterwards. On Friday, we have Justin Mattingly from the EPA, and he's going to be talking about stormwater reuse. And we're in conversations with the EPA on a couple different potential pilot projects. And all those people who have approached us from the EPA are going to be at the summit. So it's a great opportunity for us to have those conversations with them. And we have several appointments set up, you know, trying to kind of get at what the information we need. But then there's Martha Davis, and she's talking about the balance of environmental versus human needs. It really, you know, is an alignment. I added that on after listening to the conversation this morning. And then there's sessions on gray water, on black water. So all of those fall into that green infrastructure piece that we've been talking about, that there's opportunities with. And so I hope that, you know, we can all talk about some of the highlights of those sessions. But then we have a session from the mayor of Las Vegas, Louis Trujillo. That's going to be an interesting one because, as you remember last year, you know, with the fires, Las Vegas, an hour away from Santa Fe, actually ran out of water. They were in an emergency situation. And so there's lessons learned there, and we'll be hearing from him directly on like how they managed that. The U.S. Department Secretary of the Interior will be our keynote. We have the director of the EPA WaterSense program presenting, and that's Jonas Stein. He has a pilot project he wants to propose to us, which I think is going to be a great opportunity. And then we have a New Mexico track. We have New Mexico State Senator Liz Stefanik, U.S. Representative Melanie Stansberry, Councilor Romero Worth. And then there's a whole slew of on-demand sessions, and everything can be viewed for 30 days following the summit. So you don't have to take it all in. If there's pieces that you're not able to attend when the live event takes place, then you can always look at those recorded sessions later. So if you can't tell, I'm very, very excited for this year's summit. It just continues to be an opportunity for us to just bring in the information that we need. And I think that always keeps us quickly ahead of the game. And it's a great opportunity. And just so you know, it also is in alignment with our scorecard and our water conservation goals. And this event checks off 13 performance indicators for me. And so that may sound, to me, that's big. That's a very big thing for me. And so I just, you know, just to keep in mind that that's, you know, our structure, and this group and the county are part of that structure. And these resources are meant to benefit, you know, all of us. And so just a quick update, and thank you for the time.
Absolutely impressive.
And Mori, is it possible for you to circulate the website for the conference that Christine mentioned, that to the group?
Absolutely. Yes, we
Great.
can definitely do that.
Thank you.
I'm, it's just amazing. I mean, this is the passion that Christine has always comes across. And I always say that nobody's done more for water conservation in Santa Fe than she has. And she always gets embarrassed by that, but it's true. And this leads into the next part of this stormwater management. This is something we in La Cienega, the third Thursday of each month is our water planning meetings. And our next one is going to showcase stormwater management. And we're going to have a presentation by our friends Mori or Amara from the Santa Fe Watershed Association. And we're going to start talking about maybe even some demonstration projects. See, we have some funding, we have some funding. We have $150,000 from the legislature, and this may be an opportunity for us to use a little bit of that money to put in some demonstration projects. And we have a young gentleman who's a graduate of, or got a certificate from the Tucson group, John Romans, who is another person who's absolutely passionate about water harvesting and rain gardens and all those things. And we're hopeful of creating a little program where we can teach residents to do something around their house that might help the aquifer. But the big one, and as a member of the Water Policy Advisory Committee, I'm going to make this recommendation this afternoon at our meeting, is I think we need to create a stormwater management task force to mitigate the effects of what's happened to La Cienega and La Cienega as a result of floods. And there are things that can be done. I mean, I say this over and over again, but there's a piece of land that's owned by Peter Comas that's between 599 and I-25 that could be put into a really beautiful park and a place where you could gather water, because there's a whole lot of water that would come through there. And two things. One, it would reduce the flood impact. And the second part of that would be to recharge the aquifer. And to me, that's one of the things that we have to really think about in terms of where we live, is doing as much as we can to put water back into the ground, either through rain gardens or water harvesting of some sort. Stormwater management, I think, is a real opportunity. And we'll have to deal with all of the Office of the State Engineer requirements, but we can do that. So yeah, so Mori, you want to add a little bit to that? I mean, you've got the Adopt the Watershed program. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, I can talk a little bit. I think I'm still learning from you, Carl, what you're looking for specifically, and Adopt Your Watershed is kind of in both a kind of capstone time and also an amorphous development phase. So kind of an interesting time, building off of programs we've been doing for over 20 years, like Adopt the River, that has mostly focused on trash cleanup, but also really trying to emphasize the priorities that started with Adopt an Arroyo more recently, and trying to, as many of us have been talking about today, I think that one water idea from a slightly different perspective, but thinking about the water cycle in our watershed and how land management and how water conservation and how community dynamics shape how we use water, how water flows through our system, and ways that we can steward it to increase the resilience that our communities, human and ecological, can have. So how that turns out to appear on the ground at different places, I think we're still very open to developing, whether that is working on some erosion control structures, whether that's doing other kinds of or supporting other kinds of green stormwater infrastructure, rain gardens, or other types of plantings or whatnot. I think we're very excited to just be part of the conversation and really lean into our partnerships with you all to really make sure that what we're doing is making an impact and a positive impact, however we can move towards that. I think also having those educational components just to help landowners and water users be more aware of how these things are connected is something that's very important to us.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about. And I'm gonna, Michelle, put her on the spot a little bit, because we, at our last Policy Advisory Committee, she mentioned the idea that county may be looking at developing a program. So if Michelle is still there, I'd like to see what she has to say about that.
Hi, hi, yeah, put me on the spot there, Carl. Yeah, it's something that Christine and I will start to talk about and try and figure out how to.
Okay, that's a simple and quick answer. But yeah, I mean, it's one of the things, obviously funding, we got to figure out where to get money from. And so, and I'm hoping that people like John Romans can help us reduce the cost a little bit. But I mean, he is so passionate about this. He's got a very successful landscape business. And he said, I'd quit half my landscape business if I could make money doing this, or just make something doing this. And so, yeah, he's an interesting guy. Been planting bunches of walnut trees on his property along the river, because they used to be along the river. Anyway, so that's it. Now, I'm embarrassed to say, I don't have an agenda with me. So what's next on our agenda? What was that?
Carl, I
Yeah.
just wanted to add on what Mori was saying about, like, adopt the arroyo and that type of thing. And neither the city or the county have addressed the July 22nd, 2018 1,000-year flood. And, I mean, we should be probably having more of these during climate change. And it was quite a bit of damage to both city and county. And for the entities to just stand by and say, well, nothing can be done. I mean, it's really a sad state of affairs.
Well, yeah, I would second that, because one of the problems we have in La Cienega is just the trash. It brought so much trash in along La Cienega, Arroyo Hondo, La Cienega Creek. It's going to take a major effort to clean that out. And that's one of the things when we talk about contributions to the river, that's one of those things we need to clean up. So we're not putting crap into the Santa Fe River. But I'm not sure who you talked to about that. The Corps of Engineers is responsible for arroyos, right? So are they the ones responsible to come in and help clean it up, or is that a county deal?
I think it's city and county efforts that are gonna, solve this thing. Corps of Engineers, sometimes you don't want them involved because their big idea is always channelization, and that only makes the problem worse.
Any other thoughts, comments? Okay. I'm really embarrassed that I don't have my agenda in front of me.
Carl, I just put the agenda in the chat if you can access that, if you want to have a look at it, if that's
Thank you,
helpful.
dear.
No pressure.
Okay, and if we go to 11:30, we do have Daniel Timmons is going to join us to talk about the WildEarth Guardian agreement. Because from us, it didn't seem like a lot of money. Bill, how much money was there? Do you remember?
Sorry, I'm typing up my notes to share with this group so that we capture all the action items for today. But right now, the city's made a commitment of $60,000 to rehabilitate the riparian zone below Paseo. We're not saying that's our only commitment, but this, as I had mentioned, is a first step. We're really looking towards the Lower Santa Fe River planning process as a means to more collaboratively achieve those improvements that meets the needs of the community.
Okay, I mean, again, this is where the optics weren't good. Because we had this agreement between the city and WildEarth Guardians, and they're gonna do, he talked about trails and different things, and there's no one in La Cienega or downstream that knows anything about this. And so the image of the WildEarth Guardians and the city working together again wasn't a good one. So
Carl, that's just the format of a mediated
Newspapers.
settlement, you know.
Yeah, no,
man.
so, but that's good. And see, this brings up the importance of who gets approached with a mediated settlement. Not this collaborative of traditional communities, not any traditional community individually, but the big sister. She gets approached with that. So that's what we're asking you, big sister. Right on. Now you say, no, you got to come and sit down at the table with the rest of the family for the rest of what you're doing. Thank God they can only do so much damage for $60,000 at this point, you know, and then say, all right, for the rest of the time, now you have to work collaboratively in the lower river mitigation process and make yourselves useful, you know.
Well,
that's good.
I'm lost for words here because I really thought that this whole planning process was designed to meet that very objective. So I guess maybe, I hope I'm not.
I think it is. It's encouraging. It's encouraging to hear you say that. But,
Yes, it will.
That message needs to be there before like that other tentacle slithers out and you know, and there's the opportunity for you to be perceived as not doing it. I get it. I like what you're saying, Bill, and I'm with you. And yes, I see that you're with us, right? But again, that message is getting to this focused group, right? It needs to get out to the broader communities so that they see that this isn't just being ignored and that we're not at risk. We're not being threatened. It's not, you know, it's your big sister's not being mean, right?
Right.
So
that's the message. Yeah, that's the message we got to get across to residents. I mean, I was at a doctor's appointment yesterday and met Anna Gurley, who lives in La Cienega, and we started talking. And she goes, "Are you the ones who are going to take our wells away?" I mean, that's the kind of rumor and that's the kind of gossip that goes on. And I said, no, we're not. But that's the kind of stuff that we're dealing with. And the more transparent, the more things that we can get out in the open to let people know. And that planning process is going to be completely and totally transparent every step of the way, which leads me into the next agenda item, which is the Pipeline Coalition planning process, and wondering if there's been any applicants to be the facilitator for that particular planning process. One, who was it? Can you tell? You don't know?
I don't know yet. Procurement is still doing their thing to make sure that the one response meets all the procurement requirements. So, and they won't tell me who it is until next week.
Okay.
If you stop recording, I'll share.
Okay. Stop recording for a second.
Okay, one second.
So we'll just see how that works out. Anyway,
can
go
I
ahead.
take the opportunity to just get one clarifying question? I think I heard Christine mention that I guess Secretary Holland will be at the Next Generation Water Summit. Did I catch that right? Or did I have some kind of auditory hallucination?
Just about everybody else besides her. No, she's not on the agenda.
Okay, it's some undersecretary of something for Interior.
So I hope you go on and check out the agenda. The only things that I highlighted just to share were New Mexico State Senator Liz Stefanik, U.S. Representative Melanie Stansberry, and then the U.S. Deputy Secretary of the Interior.
I missed the deputy. Thank you.
I did too.
Yeah.
That would have been nice. We tried.
Okay.
Okay, going back to the Pipeline Coalition, this I just am absolutely adamant about this, is the importance of this group and the Pipeline Coalition staying engaged and participating in the process. We've done too much work. We've gotten too far not to continue the effort. I really truly believe this is a moment in time where we can do something significant. And again, it's people like Fred and Bill and the other folks and Christine, obviously, that will really help us pull this off. And it's got to be a continuing conversation, regular meetings, regular exchanges. I mean, I've got a half dozen, and some of the things that we're talking about in La Cienega, like doing rain gardens and water harvesting, are actually part of the things we're talking about for the Pipeline Coalition, as ways to restore the aquifers and get the springs running again so they can flow into the river. And so that's obviously something that is in process. Actually, some of the things we're talking about, the wastewater treatment plants, are things that are part of the coalition, that RFP that we put together in some of the tasks. So we're starting to do that. So we're already moving in a direction. It's just a matter of maintaining that direction, keeping us together and continuing to talk. And I can't tell you how supportive the Santa Fe Watershed Association's been. Not that Andy was ever not supportive, he's always been supportive, but it's that moment where everything seems to be the right timing for everything. And Andy is essential. I mean, he's like my, not my shadow, but he always brings up these things that are really kind of important, and I've forgotten something, or
He's your flashlight.
Did you remember this? Did you? Oh, yeah, I got to do that. Which brings me to the PFAS report. Michelle, are you prepared to do the PFAS report?
Cool.
That was Nandy's suggestion. Anyway. Did you throw something? You put something together, didn't you?
Oh, for today, I'm sorry, something really loud just happened in the hallway, and so I missed.
Okay.
Did you want me to talk about the PFAS thing, or?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay. So I think Bill, didn't we have a meeting with the Army National Guard in early April, I think it was? Yeah, okay. And so we don't really know anything more than what we knew then. And so I have a couple maps I could throw up real quickly. Share. Where's share on this? Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay, can everyone see this?
Yeah.
Map? Okay. So these are maps that are directly from the Army National Guard's report. They had a local consulting firm, EA, conduct the investigation, but and they're a very good consulting firm. So I have a lot of confidence in what they've created here. But so I just wanted to put up a few maps and show you what they presented to us and what it means moving forward. I'll make this bigger. So this is just an aerial photograph, if I could get it centered here, that shows the wells that are in the area in a small radius around the facility. I think it's really good to see, for everyone to understand the sheer volume of wells that are in this area.
Wow.
Yeah, and this isn't even, this is just in this close radius. It doesn't show the wells that are south of here.
So you're going all the way to it's La Cienega into La Cienega.
Yeah, it's not even showing La Cienega here. But it's good to see, for everyone to see that there are a lot of wells. I believe that there are 1,000 wells that would be considered down gradient of the facility.
Whoa.
Down gradient-ish, like a little bit cross gradient, some of them that are it depends. South is considered to be a little bit cross gradient here, but really just, giving you some context. So here are the watersheds of the area. As you all know, people who live in La Cienega are very well aware of the fact that the wetlands are recharged from the east, where these watersheds that are coming off of the mountain front recharge from the east to the west and southwest into the wetlands and that's what recharges the groundwater in this area as well, which I think is actually a lucky thing, because that means that there isn't a ton of wells that are potentially directly down gradient of the north, the facility that's to the north. Let's see. Just a quick outline of the facility itself with, here are the wells that I believe that they drilled these wells. There are more wells in, oh yeah. So these are soil borings that they turned into monitoring wells that are right on the facility itself. And then more of that. Oh. So this is what they call their area of interest or area of concern, where they are doing this particular investigation. And there's, the maps really do a really great story of telling, they do a good job of telling the story here. So I'm gonna scroll down a little bit so you can see the legend here. So the green dots are soil borings. The yellow dots are hand auger soil borings. The purple are also, soil borings, and then the blue are where they sampled groundwater. And they have identified the sludge facility at the wastewater treatment plant as a potential area of an area of potential source. We don't know anything about that yet. Oops.
Michelle,
Yeah.
is the National Guard only identifying the airport for the use of AFFF, or do they have other areas of interest around the armory or the old armory, the Willie Ortiz, and anything that may have been stored there, other PFAS besides just firefighting foam for the aircraft?
Please forgive my ignorance. Where is the other facility?
Well, the newer armory is there, I guess west of the Penn on the
Oh, sure.
frontage to I-25, across from La Cienega, a
Yeah.
little bit more north, and then the old armory is now there on Cerrillos Road, is now the Willie Ortiz building, I believe. That
Oh,
used to be the National Guard Armory when town was only that big. No,
The state, his human resources department is there.
yeah.
right?
I've been to trainings there. They are not investigating either of those other facilities at this time. And I do believe, Darren, that it is because of the AFFF use. That's the only thing they're investigating right now throughout the country is the AFFF.
Okay, and my only concern is that AFFF is a firefighting agent, not just for aircraft. So, I mean, this is an easy one to think of, but, okay.
Yeah.
Just curious.
I
if
don't
they have those-
disagree. Yeah. I guess this is probably what they got funding for.
Okay, thanks.
You bet. So let's see. Here are PFOS. You can see PFOS, octanoic acid, if I'm not mistaken. And so in general, PFOA, PFOS, and PFHXS, and there's another one, PFBS, I think, are the four that are the most ubiquitous throughout the environment in general. The, PFOA, I think, is what they use for Teflon, as well as PFOS. And so those are the older ones that we're seeing in the environment a lot. The other ones are more recent formulations, and so we're seeing less of those in general, but they're starting to be more, we're starting to see more of them. This shows the PFOS results in soil, in shallow, intermediate, and deep soils. And so the bigger the circle, the larger the the higher the concentration. And so in shallow, you can see that the circles are in the intermediate range as far as the results go. The deeper you go, the less concentrated it is, which is good. That means that hopefully we're getting the front end of it and it's not as bad as it could be. So here are PFOA detections in soil, not super dissimilar. It looks like there's even less PFOA as the deeper you go than there wasn't for PFOS. And then, let's see. PFHXS. So these are the three, PFOA, PFOS, PFHXS are the three that the Groundwater Bureau has authority to regulate in groundwater. None of the others are on the toxic pollutants list. In 20.6.2 New Mexico Administrative Code. And so theoretically, the DOD doesn't think that state groundwater standards apply to them in a general sense. They're wrong, but that's the concept being sovereign immunity, that because they're a federal facility. And of course, I would argue that a federal facility that's located on either city land or state land that's being leased doesn't really meet the definition, in my opinion, of a federal facility. But they will make that argument, and my friends at the NMED say that they will do whatever it takes to try and fight that if they push that issue. I think they should, but we'll see how that sort of pans out. Same sort of deal with PFHXS, not a lot. In the deeper you go, the less we see of it. So that's good. And then this is PFNA. We don't have a state groundwater standard for this. It looks like these are really low detections as well. The other three are the ones that were found most to be in the environment at this facility. And here we are with the super important one, groundwater. And you can see there's a couple in, this is PFOA. There are 2 detections here. It looks like there was a non-detect here and non-detect here. You know, to me, this looks like pretty good for the city, because this would be down gradient of parts of their sludge facility, and it's non-detect. So that's good. And then the deeper you go here, here is, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that. PFBS looks like they found a fairly high hit between 100, a little over 100, I think, here of this one. And the groundwater that they sampled, if I'm not mistaken, at the facility was what they're considering to be a perch zone, where it's, we don't know if it's hydrologically connected to the more regional zone below it, and they haven't looked deeper yet. So we know it's in groundwater, but we don't know if that groundwater is hydrologically connected to the regional aquifer. So that is kind of what will be in their next scope. Let's see, what's this one? Oh, these are the other 2 in groundwater. We got some hits here and here in the, looks like 100. If I'm not mistaken, it was a little over 100 here. And then really no detects of PFNA in groundwater at the wells that they drilled here. So I think that's the end of the maps. Yeah, that's the end of the map. So, so in a nutshell, there's groundwater impacts at the facility. They are not super screaming high like, say, at Cannon Air Force Base, but they're there. And the DOD has determined that more investigation is warranted. So they will start to move off of the site itself, which is just the small area within the airport there where that federal installation is. And they will start to look at groundwater that is more down gradient and see what kind of impacts there are. And I will tell you, the county has budgeted a little bit of money to kind of bolster that program, not on this facility, but more down gradient. We have to kind of figure out what that looks like for us, but this is the edge of the city. And so everything down gradient of it off of this site is the county, you know, our county residents.
Right.
So the county just, you know, we just got our contract amendment to be able to do some sampling in some wells, and we are hoping that we don't see anything in any wells, but we feel compelled to look. So sorry for the informality of this presentation. I just wanted to get this information out to you as quickly as I could. And I didn't have time to really develop anything myself. So I will stop sharing, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Michelle, I'm seeing that's on the order of nanograms per liter, right? Not even nanograms per milliliter, but is there something you could say? Can you give us an idea of some other, say, contaminant or poison that could be in water at those type of rates at what, 100 to 1400 nanograms per liter and still be considered safe? Are there other contaminants that are passing this standard? Like how big is the alarm? It's sort of one thing to see the big circle or the little circle, right? But how indicative of this is okay, so you've got a bad spot. I mean, is this as bad as the dry cleaning solution plumes or the gasoline plumes? Or
So yeah, and how I talk about this sometimes with folks is that, you know, when we first figured out in the 70s, first figured out that we needed drinking water standards in this country, it was metals that we had discovered were toxic, and they're toxic at parts per million. So, you know, those are, you know, fairly high levels of metals that you can ingest and not have issues until they're getting into these higher, you know, parts per million levels. And then in the 80s, we discovered that organics, like your dry cleaning solvents and things like that, benzene, you know, were toxic. And those concentrations in drinking water were set at parts per billion because they're more toxic, right? Mm-hmm. And now, you know, 30 years later.
There you just hit it for me, is with benzene, because I can relate. So now in it, where benzene, like you say, was measured in parts per billion in your blood test before you go get your job, right? And you could see very quickly how you were approaching your threshold limits for exposure or whatever, right? Where do we see that in terms? I'm just having trouble with the expression of nanograms per liter. I can dig benzene at parts per billion. How do I translate that to PFAS or
parts per trillion? Yeah,
this is
so it's
okay.
one order of magnitude.
Okay,
yeah,
okay,
it's
all right.
3 orders of magnitude, actually. Okay. So
thank you.
For every parts per million is 3 orders of magnitude bigger than parts per billion, which is 3 orders of magnitude bigger than parts per trillion. And so we are dealing with things that are really toxic at low levels, and they're about to set a drinking water standard for PFOA, I think, and PFOS at about 4 parts per trillion, which is 4 nanograms per liter.
All right. All right.
And so, you know, it's concerning, but remember, we're in a perched zone. We don't know that if it's in the regional aquifer. We may have gotten really lucky, and they may have caught this before it is, you know, off of the airport site. So we want to know, and you all want to know. Everyone wants to know, and so we're in the beginning stages of this. The city has committed to sampling the monitoring wells on the facility that they own, which is the sludge facility. You know, I'm super hopeful that that is not an issue, and that this is a DOD responsibility. Having worked at the Environment Department during the discovery of PFAS at Cannon, I'm not super confident in the DOD with respect to next steps and what they do. But the city and the county have committed to work together on this. And there is a huge pot of money at the state and federal level that the city and the county have committed to going after, and no one else in the state wants it. So it's kind of ours if we want it. And it's millions of dollars to help deal with this issue. And so, you know, in all my dealings with the city, it's always been great. Like in the water world, we work great together. And so I'm super confident that in this world, we'll be able to effectively work with the city. We're partners in so many ways. And this is just another way that the city and the county can partner to make, you know, to make a better and more cohesive team that can really kind of figure this thing out, whether the DOD is going to step up or not. They have committed to doing more work, to looking further. But I think that data from the city will really allow that to move at a better pace. So, you know, and I know Bill and I know John Dupuy are very willing and able and ready to work together on any issue out here that is, you know, like this. And the downstream users issue, you know, like we're embarking on that, the planning process for the San Juan Chalma return flow pipeline, you know, the PFAS issue, the wastewater treatment plant issue, you know, these are all things that the community, being the city and the county, can work together on. And I'm, you know, I know that we can do it, and I'm confident that we'll make better progress together than we would separately. So
Absolutely. Two quick questions. One is, what do they do to mitigate PFAS?
in a general sense, they have not, you know, it's point of use treatment. But Carl, remember, usually by the time you find PFAS in groundwater, it's already in drinking water. So you don't have a choice. You can't remediate it because it's already where it's going. So in this case, we may be ahead of it. And if that's the case, there are in situ things you can do. There's pump and treat. There's a variety of remediation strategies that could be successful here.
But only if there's containment, right?
That only if it's not in wells already. Yes.
Already. Has DOD by chance, sorry,
Go
has
ahead.
DOD suggested that there's any bio consumer of this chemicals, like your hydrocarbon loving organisms, anything that will any earthlings that will eat this stuff, doctor?
You know, there's a lot of research going on. It sounds like the research is discovering things every day. I don't know that there's an in situ treatment that does a similar thing to what happens with a chlorinated solvent, where they can, you know, kind of pull the chlorines off of the chain and allow it to degrade. Yeah, the state of that science is evolving quickly. I don't know.
And DOD's not just coming forth with the cheap fix to shut everybody up, right? So
No, they're still very
Okay.
much in investigation mode at this point.
thanks.
Daniel Timmons has joined us, and I believe Joanna Zhang has joined us. I'm going to ask just one real quick notification is, I'm sure you know that the La Cienega Mutual Domestic Well is in that general airport area. And so that's just a cautionary thing. With that, I'd like to welcome Daniel to talk about
Carl,
Go
could I
ahead, yes.
say real quick? So Camila Bustamante, our county commissioner, is very much trying to, during her term, address this PFAS issue. And her dad worked at the labs and he died from cancer, and they kind of pointed the finger at PFAS. And the problem is that it's so much used in manufacturing, like to keep clothes fresh in connexes and rail cars, they spray clothing with PFAS. And then it's in some dental products that we use. And so when you wash your clothes in your washer, then it goes into your septic tank, and then that flows through your leach lines into the Santa Fe River. So I mean, it's a total mess, and we just don't know as consumers what the heck is sprayed with PFAS to make it fresh or preserve it somehow.
All right, with that sobering note, we'll introduce Daniel. Daniel, welcome, welcome, Joanna. Nice to meet you. So if you'll talk about the WildEarth Garden City agreement on the OSE protest.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Carl, and everyone. I think a number of y'all were on here a couple months back when we had just finalized the settlement, so we had a quick conversation about it. So thanks for inviting me back to talk about this, and glad to see that Bill is on here as well. So correct me if I misspeak, Bill, because this was definitely obviously it's a settlement agreement, so it was a joint effort between Guardians and the city. And I actually did put together just a very short, sort of simple PowerPoint to kind of talk through some of the key points. So I think I had sharing screen capacity here. So let's see if I can do this successfully. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, great. Let me just try to put this where I can see it, and we'll get started. Okay, great. Yeah, so again, I should just start. I'm Daniel Timmons. I'm the Wild Rivers Program Director and Rio Grande Waterkeeper with WildEarth Guardians. And again, thanks for having me here. I do have a new WildEarth Guardian, Joanna Zhang, who is our Wild Rivers advocate, who started just last month, who's joining us here today. So she was not directly involved in this project, but this is as much sort of an information sharing for her as well. And so just a little bit of background. I'm not going to go into background on the return flow pipeline itself. I know that, you know, this group is very familiar with that pipeline project, and so really just kind of wanted to get into the settlement agreement itself, but just a little bit of background on that. This sort of all started when the city of Santa Fe filed their application with the state engineer for return flow credits back in November of 2021. Then there was an amended permit application in April 2022. And Guardians filed its protest on July 14th of 2022. I will note that I was at WildEarth Guardians at that time, but I didn't actually come over into the Rivers program until August of 2022. So this did somewhat predate my time, although I was on the Guardians legal team and was you know, aware of the protest going forward. You know, about 6 months later, we got a hearing scheduled that, you know, as you'll see, would have been in October of this year, and potentially, you know, a full week hearing scheduled to hear this protest at the state engineer. But in April of this year, we finalized a settlement agreement that was then approved by City Council and signed a couple weeks later, finalized. So just a quick overview map that did not come out very well, but I know, again, y'all are all familiar with this area. So, you know, really, I will just note that in the can you see my cursor here?
Yeah, Daniel, I was going to jump in. I'm not seeing anything but a white screen.
Okay. Oh, you're not seeing anything at all. Okay.
No.
Interesting.
Maybe because you have two monitors.
Yeah, let's see. Oh. Okay. How do I do that? New share. Because it says it's supposed to be showing the PowerPoint. Is that better?
Yeah, got it.
Okay. All right. The beauties of Zoom. Okay, so now I'll see if it'll let me actually scroll through. Okay, so this was the background slide that I just talked through with those dates, which you are now seeing, correct? Okay, great. So here's a map that, again, sort of in the translation, like it lost something there, but I will just note that this reach 1 up here is sort of starts at the Paseo Real Water Reclamation Facility. And then that extends down to Cienega Springs. And that is really sort of, I would say, the primary focus of this settlement agreement, but obviously recognizing that the lower Santa Fe River continues down, connects with the Cienega Creek system, and then, ultimately flows down towards Cochiti Dam and Reservoir and the Rio Grande. Note also La Bajada Community Ditch is one of the few things that actually sort of showed up on the map. So glad that was there. So, with this return flow pipeline, again, I'm just assuming a base level of like, y'all know what's going on. So I'm not gonna, sort of go through all the ins and outs of that, but, Guardians, as an environmental conservation group, our fundamental concern was with the reduced discharge to the lower Santa Fe River. And Guardians, I think, initially sort of got involved with this because of the impacts to the restored wetlands area directly downstream of the wastewater treatment plant. And that was a project that Guardians had worked on before my time at Guardians, but I'll just say sort of back in the day, was involved in that restoration project when Guardians had an active river restoration, riparian restoration program. So we're concerned about that particular wetlands area, again, sort of what drew Guardians' attention to this project. But then we also were concerned about the broader impacts of the overall riparian corridor of just having less water in the river, reducing the groundwater recharge that could potentially impair downstream springs, and all of that, of course, having impacts to aquatic and riparian fish and wildlife. And as well as reducing the water availability for downstream water users. But I think over the years, we became more aware of that particular concern. So the settlement agreement itself, I hope that, I don't know, Carl, have you shared that with this group? I know that I sent it to you.
Yeah, I believe I did.
Okay. And so if anybody doesn't have a copy of that, feel free to reach out. My email is at the end of this presentation, and I am happy to provide that. Now that it's finalized and sort of approved. It took a little bit before we could release that. But, the key terms, I would say, sort of the first one would be riparian zone enhancements. And again, focused primarily on that previously restored wetlands area that has degraded over time, and also recognizing that there will be some amount of reduction in the water flow coming out of the facility once the return flow pipeline is operational. And so we want to make sure that, that area remains sort of ecologically healthy and provides the ecological function for the, the fish and wildlife that depend on it, as well as maintains the water quality benefits that it provides. So there, the city will be looking at reestablishing a primary river channel to enhance the water quality benefits of the area and ensure that the water continues to move through that area and doesn't pond up and provide either infrastructure or water quality problems. Looking at removing some of the exotics and replacing with native species in that area. And if feasible, which is again a challenge given the airport access potentially, would be to looking at developing public access in that area, because it really is quite a special location that most of, I think, the city just is unaware that even exists. The city is also committed to establishing a monitoring program, both for the flows as well as the riparian plantings, to make sure that any restoration work, is ultimately successful in getting established and providing those benefits. And again, the city looking to spend up to about $60,000 on those improvements. Then I would say sort of probably the fundamental settlement term here relates to the operations and the discharges at Paseo Real facility, and really sort of the city optimizing or prioritizing its native water resources. So it's Santa Fe River and its local groundwater during the non-winter months, March through October, to support riparian evapotranspiration needs. So by essentially prioritizing these local sources, that will mean that there will be more of that wastewater will be treated And obviously, there's some work to be done on that front as well. But ultimately, that will be discharged into the Santa Fe River as opposed to the San Juan Chama water that will be going back to the Rio Grande, and that will be prioritized during those, I guess, the winter months or the non-growing season months. And so we set a series of minimum flow volumes that were designed based on hydrologic analysis, intended to provide perennial flow from the facility down to Ciengia Springs, where those springs will introduce additional sort of natural groundwater input to the river system and keep the river perennial down below that. And so the flow volumes kind of ranged, again, it was sort of a monthly flow volume range, particularly set based on the evapotranspiration needs that will vary depending on the season. So how much water is needed to keep that stretch of river wet depends on, again, on the season. And so it's up to about 116 acre feet per month during the summer, with a total flow volume commitment of between 900 and 1,000 acre feet per year, about 930 feet. 934 specifically is ultimately the number that we settled on. In addition to that sort of perennial flow volumes, the city is, as I said, establishing a monitoring station to verify that perennial flow is actually reaching down to the Ciengia Springs area. And then one other sort of operational adjustment is the city will be working to minimize the flux in the releases that are coming out of the treatment plant, that we realize can really vary quite substantially now, and they're going to minimize that to about 25% of a variation on a daily basis. And really that's intended to sort of raise the floor of that fluctuation and ensure that minimum flow, again, that just relying on a monthly average wasn't necessarily going to ensure that there was always actually water getting down to Ciengia. And so this is part of that process. One additional commitment that the city is making is to pursue in-stream leasing of between 250 and 500 acre feet of their existing Rio Grande water rights, and looking at about a 10-year term, and hoping to be able to use the state's strategic water reserve to protect those rights. But also, if that's sort of not feasible because that requires sort of negotiations with the Interstate Stream Commission and all of that sort of out of the city's control, then would be looking potentially at direct in-stream lease or other options of trying to protect that water in stream. And so just sort of final thoughts, quote from the city of Santa Fe's mayor, sort of describing this as a win-win, with the city's recognition that the San Juan Chama return flow project is a key piece of infrastructure needed to secure the city's long-term water supply needs, essential for the city to continue to thrive in the decades ahead. But through these negotiations, we've also figured out a way to protect a living, flowing Santa Fe River that is so beloved by our community. And I would say that Guardians, again, we entered this settlement agreement, I think, with excitement. It's, it was several months of negotiations to get to this, and we do feel like that, it wasn't just that we avoided a week-long potential hearing in October, but that we actually came to a resolution that, that the city is now committing to keep water in the lower Santa Fe River, that absent this settlement agreement, the city would really have sort of no legal obligation to continue to put water in the lower Santa Fe River. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions. I'll leave this up for just a second in case anybody wants to take down my contact information, dtimmons@wildearthguardians.org, and my phone number is up there as well. And again, this is just a photo here of that restored wetlands area below the treatment facility. Okay, I'm going to see. I think I successfully stopped sharing, so I'm happy to answer any questions. And I will also put Bill on the spot as well in case you have questions for him.
Start. . Well, one of the things I think we're concerned about is the 23 years of contamination of it. So the wetlands was initially supposed to help clean the river. We've heard from city staff, this was some time ago, that it doesn't do that anymore. It's become what they call a nutrient sump or nutrient sink. And so we are very cautious about what is in that area. And I think the idea of an ecological assessment is something that would be welcome, because I think we're all genuinely concerned about what's happened to that environment as a result of not being managed. And I hope you take the time to listen to the rest of today's meeting, because there are a lot of topics I think you would find, and you and Joanna would find of interest. It's been a pretty intense kind of discussion, but a well-spoken and well-meaning discussion. But there are a lot of optics involved. And going back 23 years ago, when the community didn't feel like they had much of a say in that decision to put in the wetlands. Brian Bird, many years ago, after some conversation, described it as a poorly located demonstration project. And when we talk about restoration, there was nothing to restore. There was never anything before that you were restoring, because that was an area before the wastewater treatment plant where the river went subterranean for an extended period of time, with little pockets of springs that would come into the river. And so that's obviously something, and $60,000, we all went, wait a second, that doesn't seem like a lot. You need more money. Go ahead, Darren, your turn.
Okay, so hi again, Daniel. Of course, my initial reaction that the city and the Guardians had come to a settled agreement. There's all the resentment of why didn't this come from the broader pipeline coalition, et cetera, et cetera. But super encouraged to see that downstream users were listed in intent, and that was it's obvious intent that we have. Also key to those coalition discussions, baseline flows being established. I'll go for the political expediency and say, good on you, Guardians, right on. And we'll continue to work on any perceptions of, animosity or whatever from the way this, like you say, the poorly located demonstration project went bad. Super key, did you notice, Carl, rechannelization? And I know William's talking about rechannelization of arroyos and all that, but we know, and we have said in collaborative meetings and discussions over the years, that that's exactly what part of the problem was. The development of that nutrient sump, right, was caused by that ridge and swale system that was put in there to deliberately back up the flow, which is what disturbed us in Lauhalo, and we had to go and break beaver dams 24 hours in advance of releasing, up to 200 acre feet of water that were being captured in that artificial wetland. So yeah, that went awry. Yes, increasing flow so it gets to at least reach one. I would only be curious, is there something in the agreement, or are we going to pick up from reach one? Is that's where we said this is an achievable goal? Let's stop reach one at Sinagia and be able to control that area, especially with limited budget or whatever, right? Reassess and then go forward, right, to the other reaches. Am I kind of correct, or is there more specifics, or are we waiting for the mitigation plan to come up with the treatments?
You're absolutely correct, Darren, and it's a multi-pronged approach, as I would describe it, where the city is emphasizing, and as you can see, as evidenced by the data, a reduction of groundwater pumping, and we are seeing recovery of the aquifer, which eventually will provide benefit to flows in the springs of Cienegua. But again, this has been a long-standing issue, and it's not a quick fix. We view this as step one of a long process. We do hear your concerns, and they're valid.
Well, and we've discussed at length before too, that each one of these reaches is distinct because the mitigation treatments in each one will need to be different. They're just, it's not one, it's apples and hand grenades, right? From one to the other. Okay, that's cool. I just wanted to clarify that, and good step, and that's super positive. And I guess part of the discussion you may have missed this morning, Daniel, was just about continuing to build this relationship of trust. We've got a lot of repairing that to do, and you guys ended up on the wrong team from the lower river perspective, right? But what we're doing now, I think, is super key. And again, now I have some talking points. I have to go back to the community and say, oh no, look, this actually contained what our mayordomo was talking about, what our president was talking about. So that way we're not able to see that, yeah, just the locomotive has sped away, right? So but so I'd say that's super positive. Thanks, and thanks for presenting that.
Hey, Patricio's had his hand up for a while. Patricio. Or did he do it by accident? Anyway, I thought it might be appropriate. Go ahead, William.
Yeah, I just want to build on what you said and what Darren said. The Santa Fe River Traditional Communities Collaborative had a historical subcommittee that we looked at what the historic river looked like. And those wetlands were never there. Unfortunately, I believe it's the southwestern flycatcher, an endangered species, moved into that area. But I mean, there was never any wetlands there. I mean, there are 33 springs along the historic Santa Fe River that our historian Hilario Romero has cataloged based on what the European explorers came and saw in their journals. But
we can't make out what you're saying.
Oh, okay. You're frozen.
I think it might be Carl's internet going out, but William, I can hear you okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
So basically,
Turn off your video,
wetlands
Carl.
have no historic significance.
Yeah, thanks for that, William. I think that's, I guess I agree with that sort of historic assessment. And then, sort of our thinking is also that, the wastewater treatment plant is there now, and that water is being discharged. And so it's, I sort of look at it as almost sort of an analogous, unnatural spring that is now there. And so, want to make sure that that water is, I guess, providing the good that it can, as opposed to having all the negative impacts that sometimes it has caused for downstream folks.
Thanks for that, Dan. Oh, sorry, Patricio, go
Mori.
ahead. I just had a quick question following up on some of our earlier discussions about water quality, and I didn't hear you say that water quality was one of the things that you'll be monitoring. And I think a lot of questions that folks are having is the pollution that further downstream folks are seeing from the wastewater treatment plant, or is it from the wetlands, or is it from septic systems or other sources? But could water quality monitoring be added to sort of a remediation component of these wetlands, rather than just kind of the restoration or the adding on top of what's already there?
Yeah, I mean, that was not something that we were that we incorporated formally into the settlement agreement. We have definitely had conversations about the water quality issues, and it's an issue that we remain concerned about, and I think we'll I think, like all of you, figuring out how to do that monitoring. I think maybe that monitoring station might be a good place to try to do some additional water quality sampling, just because you would then be able to sort of match it up with the flow data. I mean, one of the things with that monitoring that I guess I didn't sort of get into is that it's not just sort of like compliance monitoring, although that's, compliance with the settlement. It's partly that, but it's also intended to help really improve sort of the baseline understanding of sort of the general hydrology and the seepage in particular in that Reach 1 area, that where we'll have sort of the discharge data at the treatment plant, monitoring of sort of what's coming downstream there by the treatment plant, matching that up with what's, getting down to Cienega Springs, and really be able to really fine tune our understanding of that area. So that's, I think, another benefit that will,
Yeah.
and I think there's actually a commitment that the city will produce some sort of report in 10 years or so, once we have a baseline of that data to really be able to assess.
Patricio, did you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, Carl. I put down my hand. I got stuck on the phone there.
Okay.
No,
Well,
I was just curious about the beavers. I know we had some beavers down there a while back.
They're still there.
That was my follow-up question. Actually, I was just wondering if
Get
they're
the
still
Game and
down
Fish
there.
to
or
follow
not.
up on that. Before we go, because Joanna's new, I thought we might go through a real quick introduction. Maury, you want to start?
Sure. Hi, Joanna. I'm Mori with the Santa Fe Watershed Association.
Executive Director. Bill,
Yeah, hello, I'm Bill Schneider with Santa Fe Water.
William,
William Me, I work for a Village Association and the Sequia Association.
Darren,
Hi, Joanna. I'm Darren Munzberg, the Vice President of the La Valhalla Community Ditch and Mutual Domestic Water Association.
Fred,
Fred Heerbrand, I'm the engineer supervisor at the wastewater treatment facility for City of Santa Fe.
Patricio,
Hello, I'm Patricio, Water Resources and Conservation Specialist here for the City of Santa Fe.
Andy. Your turn, Andy. Who
Oh,
are
I didn't
you?
hear you, Carl. I'm sorry. So Andy Otter, Northern New Mexico Group of the Sierra Club and board of the Friends of the Santa Fe National Forest.
Christine?
Did you say Christine?
Yes, I said Christine.
Oh. Christine Chavez, City of Santa Fe Water Conservation Manager.
Michelle. Michelle's the water resources person for the county. And I have way too many hats. I'm the spokesperson for the Pipeline Coalition. I'm co-chair of the collaborative, and I now serve as vice chair of the Water Policy Advisory Committee for the county. So that's us. We've been together going on 12 years now, I think, 11 or 12 years. A lot of expertise, a lot of knowledge, opportunity for people to share ideas about water. And this moment in time is a really good one because it seems all the forces are coming together, and we're going to be able to do something significant with water issues in the Santa Fe area. I mean, one of the comments I always hear is, for the first time in recent memory, we have the WildEarth Guardians and the Acequia Association sitting down to chat. And to us, that's a really strong movement in the right direction. So welcome aboard, Joanna. I hope you enjoy us. We're kind of a fun group, a lot of really smart people, and I'm not one of them. But there are a lot of smart people in this group, and it's always a pleasure to sit and chat and talk. And I think we have some opportunity to really do some action items. Bill, I'd love to see your copy of the action items that you put together. And maybe we can add to that, or we can take some of that and work with it. And I look forward to probably seeing you on Tuesday at the County Commission meeting, I would guess. So County Commission, for Joanne to let you know and Daniel know, is that the County Commission has requested that the city come explain what happened with the wastewater treatment plant. And so that's going to be on Tuesday, I think at 5 o'clock, I'm pretty sure. And so that should be an interesting, at 4?
I think so.
Okay, we'll get the time out for everybody, but yeah, it should be an interesting, you come into this and at an interesting time, so welcome aboard. Anything else today, folks?
I'll just say real
Thanks
quick.
for all the welcomes.
Yeah. Thanks, Joanna. I'll just say real quickly. Yeah, I appreciate the invitation, and I hope that we're able to figure out a way to engage more regularly. I like have a regularly scheduled meeting that unfortunately falls at the same time every Thursday, and I'm trying to see if I can get that switched around, but it's not solely up to me. So that's, but yeah, maybe we can loop Joanna in a little more regularly.
Well, as always, thank you for what you do for water in the Santa Fe area. Thanks a lot, guys. Talk to you soon.
Appreciate you all.
See ya.
Yeah.